Good morning, this is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Tom McKenzie in London. These are the stories that set your agenda. It is Election Day USA. After one of the most dramatic presidential campaigns in history, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump making last-minute pitches to swing voters in Pennsylvania and Michigan. The dollar steadies, with traders bracing for volatility from a tight election result. Asian stocks climb after China's services activity grows more than expected. And Boeing workers vote to accept a new wage deal and end a crippling strike, clearing the way for the plane maker to restore operations. Good morning. Happy Tuesday, November the 5th. Markets in a holding pattern, then the election uncertainty. Many investors will be staying on the sidelines until they get clarity, of course, on the outcome of that election, and that may not come through for days, possibly even weeks. But we'll see, of course, how that all unfolds. The final pitch is being made to those voters then, as we said, by both candidates. European futures currently flat. The activity right now in the equities market is firmly focused on China. Gains coming through for Chinese markets, and we'll unpack that story for you in the next minute or so. FTSE 100 futures currently pointing lower by 0.2%. S&P futures stateside after modest losses yesterday of 0.3%, currently flat. Nasdaq futures looking at very modest gains of just 0.1% after dropping around 0.3 yesterday. Let's flip the board and look cross asset. We know there has been a story around potential sell-off in treasuries, particularly towards the long end, if there is a Trump presidency, on expectations of greater fiscal stimulus and maybe tariffs as well. Currently, though, little movement across these US treasuries. The 10-year at 4.29. Euro dollar, the focus, of course, on the dollar, could be the most sensitive asset on the back of that election result. 108 currently on the single currency. Bitcoin as well, part of that Trump trade mix, currently at 68,000, below the 70,000 level it had crossed earlier last week, I should say. And Brent, $75 a barrel, currently flat on oil after some modest gains that came through. We have Saudi Aramco's vote, or earnings numbers, I should say, coming through as well. A miss for Saudi Aramco. That is a story we'll get the details for you on as well through this hour. Let's get to the US election then. It is officially voting day in the US. The first polling station has actually opened already in Dixville Notch. The small town in New Hampshire has 6 registered voters, just 6 registered voters, and has opened polling at midnight since 1960. We are seeing live pictures right now of Donald Trump, I believe, in Grand Rapids, Michigan. There we go. There are the live pictures of the former president and, of course, the Republican nominee speaking live in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We've also been hearing and seeing pictures as well. Kamala Harris, they both candidates spent their last hours campaigning in the swing state of Pennsylvania. Now, of course, Trump is in Michigan for a presidential election that is on track to be one of the closest ever. Trump, as you can see, continuing that speech, the final one of this campaign for the Republican candidate. Vonnie Quinn standing by for the latest. What were the closing messages, Vonnie?
Yes, Tom, it was so interesting today to listen to the campaigns. And as you say, Trump still campaigning even on election day. You know, the typical things that had been, infusing voters recently. So the economic messaging, the immigration messaging and so on. However, I will say that Donald Trump in the last few hours has become very grievance filled. He's been talking about how the election is basically already won for him. He actually said a few minutes ago that the Republicans are leading by hundreds and thousands of votes. And I'm directly quoting there. He also said North Carolina is reliable for me. I mean, I've never lost, and I don't think we're going to start now. That said, that's not what the polls are revealing. And you mentioned Dixville Notch. That's not what voting in that 6-person town has revealed either. There are 4 Republicans registered in that town, 2 independents, and the vote was 3 to Kamala Harris, 3 to Donald Trump. So split down the middle, just like the final polls we've been seeing are, which actually is a little bit of an aid to Kamala Harris because she picked up a little steam in those polls.
So what is the mood then? What does it all suggest about the mood in both campaigns as we close out this historic campaign in the US?
Well, I think if you just look at those polls, it suggests that Kamala Harris's campaign should be very pleased with the result. Still a little sceptical going into polling day. 81 million votes have already been cast, and that's a huge number of votes. So what they have been trying to do over the last few days is really just get out any of those last-minute voters that are trying to make up their minds, those voters that are called low propensity, voters that maybe sometimes vote, sometimes don't vote, they want them to get out. Even if you're voting down-ballot Republican to vote Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket, other than that, the mood has to be fairly good in the Harris camp. All of those polls that I mentioned really were within the margin of error. It is so tight, this election. The PBS Maris poll, for example, showing the Veep beating Donald Trump by 4 percentage points nationally. That's a huge turnaround in the last few weeks. We had the New York Times poll showing the vice president beating Trump in North Carolina, which he won in 2020 and 2016. And that's why he referred to North Carolina tonight in his campaign speech. So it's really all to play for. We should know the fairly safe states relatively quickly. However, those states that are toss-ups, the swing states, those 93 electoral votes, it's anyone's guess. If it's within 1 percentage point, they go to a recount, and after that, there could even be some legal challenges.
Yeah, Vonnie Quinn with a great setup of what to expect then. The timing as well, crucial. This could, of course, take a number of days to get a clear result from this election. Vonnie Quinn will be covering all of this for us throughout the next few days, of course. So thank you for the update. Let's get to the market reaction then. Market liquidity evaporating, of course, ahead of the biggest risk event of the year. Let's bring in Bloomberg's Valerie Teitel. Valerie, how are investors readying for this election?
Tom, we are preparing for a monkey knife fight tonight. Let me tell you, it is going to be a good one. The cleanest election trade is really still seen as the U.S. dollar, but let me take you through the asset classes really quickly. In the volatility market, we're implying a 1.7% swing in the S&P 500 over the course of tomorrow's trading session. Most of that movement, though, is focused in crypto and clean energy stocks. Crypto stocks are implying around a 10% swing. Clean energy stocks, seen as a Kamala play, is implying around a 6% swing. So the volatility in the equity market is really focused a bit more nuanced. We have seen a lot of de-risking in treasuries on the back of that big rally yesterday, perhaps showing, Tom, that we are set for a surge in volatility once the winner becomes clear, if it does later tonight. The real jazz, though, is happening in the FX vol space. The dollar is seen as the cleanest election play. And let me tell you what's going on in CNH volatility, in the Chinese yuan. It has hit a record high for FX implied volatility for the offshore and the onshore yuan. If you switch onto my next chart, I can show you there. That is not the chart, but that's okay. We can also look at euro dollar volatility and dollar mex volatility with the Mexican peso. Here we go. These are also at yearly highs, Tom. So the cleanest play is really as seen as the dollar, and then behind that, it's all these economies that are exposed to the threat of higher tariffs, being that China, being that Mexico, or being that here in Europe.
OK, look, you had me at monkey knife fight, quite frankly, but a great breakdown of how these asset classes could adjust around whatever election result we get. A focus clearly on the US dollar, and then on the downside, potentially, if you get a Trump victory, of course, would be some of those commodity FX, Mexican peso, for example, in focus. But all of the asset classes, of course, in the spotlight before we get that result. Markets reporter Valerie Teitel with the details and the setup for us. Let's cross over to Asia right now. We have Avril Hong standing by in Singapore. And Avril, quite the day when it comes to Chinese equities.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really interesting how they seem to be just shrugging off the U.S. election, more concerned with what is happening domestically. We got services activity based on a private survey, which showed that continued signs of improvement in how stimulus from September is working its way through the economy, through sentiment. And this is following on from a trend from data, including factory activity in the past week, that shows continued improvement. But I think by far the big thing that markets were kind of jumping on today were the headlines out of China's NPC. Top legislators are said to be considering a proposal that would allow local governments to kind of move some of their off-balance sheet debt to their official accounts. And this is a way for them that could ease their financial burden, free things up for spending on other things like construction projects and employee salaries. So something that would be stimulative for the economy. So this is what we're seeing in Chinese equities outperformance. extending gains from yesterday. We are seeing offshore Yuan looking really flat against the greenback, despite, as Val was just alluding to, the implied volatility looking all sorts of crazy. Some risk, though, to this potential plan that might be put into action, so-called debt swap. As flagged by our MLive strategist Mark Cram, feels that there could be negative credit ratings action, something for bond traders in China to consider. Let's flip the board, take a look at what's going on across assets in Japan. Today, now we still have stock market action on the Nikkei, on the topics, because it is the first day where the Tokyo Stock Exchange is seeing extended trading hours, an extra 30 minutes. In terms of the price action you're seeing, this is a recouping of Friday's steep losses. There were no thanks to Governor Ueda's hawkish tone. Today, dollar yen is getting a boost from dovish comments from a potential kingmaker in local politics out of Japan, but also consider the US election and the Fed, the risk to the upside for dollar yen as well. Tom.
OK, Ava Hong in Singapore with the Asian market action, the volatility in the FX space. Thank you. Now to a major corporate story that's broken just in the last 30 minutes or so. Boeing workers have voted to accept a new labour contract and end a strike that has crippled the plane production from the company for more than 7 weeks.
They secured a victory. They voted by 59% to accept the agreement, and they get to move forward. The strike will end, and now it's our job to get back to work and start building the airplanes, increase the rates, and bring this company back to financial success.
OK, for more, let's bring in Bloomberg's transport reporter, Danny Lee, who's been across this story for us from day one. Danny, four-time lucky then for Boeing. What does it mean for the company?
It means now that Boeing can get back to focusing on what it does best in building planes. Still, that's going to take some time for the workers who will get back in the factory from Wednesday, and then they can start to see Boeing ramp up production. But that's going to take ultimately a lot of time. And that was always a concern for analysts when Boeing and the union workers who went on strike. But as John Holden said, this was a defining moment for the union workers who secured that substantial gain in pay raises and settled a dispute that was ultimately passed by 59% of the union membership on 26,000 votes. But still, there is dissent there, and you can see that with the unhappiness still around pensions. But John Holden saying that this is something pensions are going to be fighting about for still a long while to come. So whilst the strike moment is over, there's still that tension underlying in that. And at least for now, for new CEO Kelly Ottberg, can focus on what he needs to do in writing that Boeing ship on the wider strategic changes.
Yeah, indeed. So crossing that major hurdle for the new CEO, as you said, Kelly Ottberg. What is next on his lengthy, presumably lengthy to-do list?
The key thing now is to figure out what Boeing needs to focus on next. It's does he jump the space unit, which has been a money-losing business that's cost Boeing a lot of money, and also just because that cash burn that Boeing will face into next year, into the first half of next year, how they manage to settle on that. So there are still many things financially and also strategically that he'll need to focus on. And of course, with this strike being done, this should alleviate the threat of a credit rating downgrade that was at risk from this strike.
OK, Bloomberg transport reporter Danny Lee, thank you very much indeed. A consequential day for Boeing with the ending of that strike. Coming up, the future of US-China relations. As voting gets underway in the US, we'll get the view from the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China. That is next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back. Happy Tuesday. Chinese shares climbing after the Taixing Services Index picked up more than expected, and the top legislative body reviewed a proposal to refinance the hidden debt of local governments. Upbeat comments as well from Premier Li Qiang at the China International Import Expo in Shanghai, also helping to boost sentiment as he took aim at the EU and US over trade policies. This all comes as voting, of course, is now underway in the US election. Standing by in Shanghai for us is Bloomberg's chief North Asia correspondent, Stephen Engel, who's at the expo in that financial hub, the city of Shanghai. Stephen.
Yeah, you know, a lot of these Chinese leaders, including the Premier Li Qiang, kind of talking up the prospect of stimulus as the National People's Congress Standing Committee meets in Beijing behind closed doors, possibly going to unveil by the end of this week some stimulus. But Li Qiang really saying that they're going to hit that target of GDP growth around 5%, also talking up opening up this economy and this nation more to foreign investment. Let's get more on that from the European Chamber of China. He is the Vice President of the European Chamber here, also the chair of the Shanghai chapter, Carlo D'Andrea. Thanks so much for joining us. So Li Qiang is saying the right things, and I know in the more recent papers that came out of the European Chamber, you talk about the members wanting more action and not just more talk. So did he say the right things?
I mean, first of all, it's a good thing that he came here to Shanghai. Last year was not here. So this shows a commitment that the central leadership got here in Shanghai and to recover from the past year and the harsh of Shanghai lockdown. It's important that he said the right things, but it's even more important if he walks the talks, because as you may have read in our publication, the position paper, among others, the promise fatigue is what our members are suffering now, because we would like to see more reforms and more reforms happening faster.
What is it going to take? I mean, more fiscal stimulus will help the underlying economy, but getting that sentiment up. I saw that in the survey. Right now, the number of European companies, your members, who are planning more investment is at a record low.
Yes, sadly, this is all the consequences that you are having when you're losing a bit of confidence in the market. This also happened to match with the fact that for the first time after many years, over 70% of our members believe that the EBITDA that they are doing here in China is similar, if not lower, than the other part of the world. And so the headquarters starts to think why we should put money in China if it became more and more complicated. Very good that there are new stimulus. In fact, this is we have almost monthly opportunity to meet with the Shanghai municipality and authority in order to exchange our problem, our challenge, and to listen to them, the new implementation and the new rules. The problem is that it's very China lost a bit of the coolness of the time prior COVID.
What are the chances or likelihoods of a full-blown trade war breaking out because of the EV tariffs that the EU has imposed on Chinese EVs? There's talk, of course, of retaliation, whether it's cognac in France or pork from the Netherlands and Spain, other products. What are you hearing from your members and how they're feeling about it right now?
Indeed, it's really important the leaders meets, events like this where you have a different representative from EU countries coming to Shanghai is very important. As well, we have a delegation from China going to Europe in order to understand which one is the framework where we can cooperate or not. We cannot hide ourselves that the relationship between EU and China is one of the lowest points since ever. What we need to do is continue to find the common ground. For instance, for the first time, if you ask me what is new at this 7th edition of the CIE, I can tell you we have been advocating for many years that this should be an event for all the companies, include the small, medium enterprises that for so long they were excluded due to the cost, due to the economic burden, and especially because this is more government affair, trade fair, than a trade fair itself. So this year, for the first time, we're going to hold a small, medium enterprise dialogue with the Shanghai authorities, and we will attend to the vice minister. We have 50 companies coming with us in order to make this market more accessible for the small and medium enterprises.
I'm not going to ask you who the European Chamber would like to see in the White House, but that obviously is something at the backdrop of this. People are watching it. Later today, there will be an election in the United States, as you know. How would better relations between China and the United States help European companies?
Of course, today, November 5th, there is the opening of the CIE here in Shanghai. And on the other part of the world, you have this important election, which is going to complete a year full of election. Started also with the one in Europe last May. So whatever is going to win, it still will be complicated for who is doing business here in China, especially if you think that Madam Harris can win. Maybe you will have a more predictable business environment instead if the Trump administration will win. What do we have to advocate to be the voice of the European businesses here in China? That overall leaders should talk and business should go easier. In order to do that, we need to find common ground where the WTO should be reformed and other organizations where it's able to have an exchange should work.
And China's taken that EV dispute to the WTO.
Probably.
Carlo D'Andrea, thanks so much for your time on Bloomberg Television here in Shanghai. All right, Tom, I'm going to send it back to you from Shanghai.
Great stuff, Steve. Thank you very much indeed. Bloomberg's chief North Asia correspondent, Stephen Engel, on the ground for us at the International Import Expo in Shanghai. Now, Beijing has filed a complaint with the WTO over those EU tariffs that Steve was referencing on Chinese electric vehicle imports, accusing the bloc of protectionism. The formal complaint raises the risk of greater tit-for-tat confrontation in a trade relationship worth more than $800 billion just last year. The two sides are still talking, with the EU sending officials to Beijing to discuss a possible agreement on pricing. Coming up, a closer look at Europe's view of the US election and how the poll could impact some of the continent's fragile coalitions. That's coming up. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. Back to how the markets then are thinking about this US election. Morgan Stanley's chief US equity strategist says the US election could present a market clearing opportunity. Mike Wilson told us what he sees as the top concerns for traders ahead of the vote that is now taking place in the US.
The general trend in labor is down. We're in a late cycle economy. So the equity market is worried about growth slowing, and that's why the Fed's cutting interest rates. Okay. So the bond market the market goes up because growth is better and people believe that, then it could be okay for equities. If bond market yields go up because term premium is widening, because of fiscal sustainability issues, then it's a problem.
Well, I guess the reason why I ask this is because the Trump trade the knee-jerk reaction supposedly is bond yields go up and equities rip, particularly in the more cyclical sectors. I'm thinking of financials. Based on the idea that you're not necessarily getting some sort of economic impulse that's immediately overlaid onto this scenario, why should risk assets continue to rally if yields continue to surge simply on this idea that the deficit's increasing and that bond vigilantes suddenly could be back?
Well, first of all, the financials is a little bit different because that's a dereg sort of call, and I do think that one's fairly visible. I think if you have a Trump presidency and maybe even a red sweep, you could get more lenient regulatory environment. Maybe M&A picks up. That's kind of the financials trade, but that's unique. And we don't think the financials have really rallied that much on that trade yet. It's been more about the third quarter earnings season and the fact that we went into that earnings season with not a lot of high expectations. So I think there's scope for further follow through in certain quote unquote Trump trades. At the same time, there's probably the other side, which is that I think a lot of the negative trades have played out for the Trump trades. Bonds have sold off probably too much. And the renewables and things like consumer goods companies that will be hurt by tariffs have really been hammered. So if Harris wins, you could see a pretty big rebound in some markets. So there's a lot of permutations here. It's not as clear cut. I think you said it exactly right. It's all about the setup. Okay, stocks and asset prices move based on positioning as much as they do about the actual news. I'm looking for a clearing event. Okay, I'm hoping this is a clearing event, and then we can kind of get back to doing what we get paid to do, which is analyze interest rates, earnings growth, and kind of multiples, trying to figure out, okay, what's the fundamental case here? And my guess is that could take maybe a month to kind of clear.
Morgan Stanley's chief US equity strategist, Mike Wilson, speaking to Bloomberg there. Coming up, we're going to take a look at how the US election has split opinion in Europe. More on how the result could impact the EU. That is coming up next. This is Bloomberg. Good morning. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Tom McKenzie in London. These are the stories that set your agenda. It is election day, USA, after one of the most dramatic presidential campaigns in history. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump making last-minute pitches to swing voters in Pennsylvania and Michigan. The dollar steadies, with traders bracing for volatility from a tight election result. Asian stocks climb after China's services activity grows more than expected. And Boeing workers vote to accept a new wage deal and end a crippling strike, clearing the way for the plane maker to restore operations. Check in on these markets. When it comes to equities, it's all about what's happening in China, with some economic impulses coming through from the Caixin services data, but also positive commentary from the Premier Li Qiang in terms of the additional tools at their disposal to get to that 5% growth target. Overall, though, globally, of course, the focus is on that US election. Voting has now started. Volatility primed into these markets. For a moment, at least, many investors will be staying on the sidelines. The results may not be known in their entirety for a number of days. European futures currently flat. FTSE 100 futures just edging lower by 0.1%. S&P futures a little move higher by 0.1% after downside of 0.3 yesterday. Nasdaq futures on the 100 looking to add just 25 points. Let's flip the board and look cross asset. The dollar, the cleanest way to reflect the outcome of that election is the view, at least from some strategists out there. Euro dollar currently at 108. The yield story as well in focus. Treasuries largely unmoved at this point. 428 is what's being yielded on the benchmark 10-year. Bitcoin as well could be sensitive around this election outcome. 68,636, up 2.3% so far in the session for the largest cryptocurrency out there by market cap. And Brent at $75 a barrel, suddenly and currently unchanged in today's session. Worth reminding viewers as to what is happening in the Indian markets as well, just briefly. This was a redhead that crossed a couple of minutes ago. The MSCI India index sliding 10% from its September peak. And you can probably draw a line between the gains that have come through from Chinese equities and the downside, at least since that September peak for Indian stocks. Some of that rotation into India being unwound, it seems. That's a story we'll keep across for you, of course, but important if you have exposure to that market. Let's get back, though, to the key event of the moment, the key event arguably of the year when it comes to these markets. The outcome of the US election will have a major impact globally, of course, from Ukraine and the Middle East to world trade. Let's take a closer look at Europe's view and bring in Bloomberg's Oliver Crook, standing by for us in Berlin. Ollie, where does Europe stand on Harris and Trump?
Yeah, so listen, Tom, what we sort of talk about a great deal is about sort of the impact and the obviously very differing views on NATO and Ukraine between these two candidates. This is one of the sort of top issues for Europeans. Of course, there is also the question of trade and tariffs. We've had a lot of research out saying that basically that 10% tariff that Trump has threatened could shave 1 percentage point off of growth of GDP in Europe from the United States. And of course, there is this question, crucial question of competitiveness that we're dealing with here in Europe. And really, no matter what the outcome of the U.S. election is, this is going to be a sore point, because both of these presidents potentially are more protectionist, as Joe Biden was. But what we got also was a poll from the different nations within Europe. And the question was, if you were to vote in the American election, who would you vote for? And it's interesting, basically what you see, these are the sort of two extremes that we got in Europe. It seems like the further north you go in Europe, and Denmark, Finland, Sweden are all pro Kamala Harris. You can see that Denmark 85%, Finland 82%, Sweden 81%. Serbia, the most supportive nation in Europe for President Donald Trump, coming in at 59%. Hungary and Bulgaria not too far behind. What I think is interesting is they actually also conducted this poll in Russia, where you had the number there. The support for Donald Trump was 43% and for Harris was 12%. So actually lower than you saw from some of these other Eastern European countries.
What about the rest of the world, Ollie?
Yeah, so when you break this down across the world in the sort of the regional blocks, this gets sort of really quite interesting. Overall, there is a clear favoring of Kamala Harris. The question was, who would you vote for in the U.S. election if you could? Overall, across the world, 53% of people said they would vote for Kamala Harris, 26% for Donald Trump. The largest spread that you saw across the world was in Latin America. There, 72% for Kamala Harris, 16% for Donald Trump. And Western Europe is not too far behind. You see that at 69% pro-Harris, 16% pro-Trump. Where the spread gets really tight, the tightest that you get really across the world, is in Eastern Europe, about a 5-point spread there, still in favor of Kamala Harris, but much closer. What I thought was interesting was the sort of Arab world in the Middle East, where the spread really dwindles down to about 4%. And when you ask in sort of more specifically some of the questions about global stability, this was another question that was on the poll that was posed to people. Under whom do you think there's going to be more stability in the world, under Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? What we saw was that if you have a Kamala Harris presidency, 32% of respondents think that the world will be more stable, only 19% in the event of Donald Trump. 36% say there will be basically the same, and 20% for Trump. And that to global stability, the question was, will it decrease under Kamala Harris? 17% said yes. Under Donald Trump, 74% of the global respondents to this poll said that global stability would decrease under President Donald Trump.
OK, Bloomberg's Oliver Crook, thank you very much indeed. That's a great breakdown of how the rest of the world is thinking about this US election. Let's get more details now, more analysis in terms of how this is all shaping up and what to watch for as well in the hours and days ahead. Let's bring in Scott Lucas, Professor of US and International Politics at the Clinton Institute, University College Dublin. Scott, thanks for waiting patiently for this, and thanks for your time. Let's start with where you think both campaigns are at this stage as voting now starts in the US.
Toss-up election, as it has been for weeks. 7 states in play: Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan in the north. In the Sun Belt, North Carolina, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona. What's interesting in the last few days is, without making any predictions, is that the feeling of energy and indeed of momentum has been more on the side of the Harris campaign than on the Trump campaign. You've seen an emphasis in the last few days on the Harris campaign on the positive. We can move forward. We don't need to go back. We can make this a better country, a better situation, and we can preserve the system. From Trump, you've got these very dark dystopian messages about the U.S. and the world. You've got the insults, which I won't repeat in full here. And of course, you've got certain communities who effectively have been targeted, almost demonized. Significantly, for example, that Madison Square Garden rally talking about Puerto Ricans, talking about Hispanics, talking about blacks, and deriding women. And in fact, it's that last point. I think it'll be the vote of women, especially young women, that could be decisive today.
OK, so watch the vote of women, the female vote in particular. Scott, we've had early voting, of course, and in quite some numbers, something like 70 million, at least 70 million votes have already been cast ahead of today. What do you read in? Are there any signals there in the early voting?
There are 74 million votes. That's 44% of the total turnout in 2020. I don't think you can read that in itself as being this goes Democrat or this goes Trumpist. But I think two things. One is the general rule of thumb is that the higher the turnout, both between early voting and on election day, favors the Democrats. The Democrats lost because they didn't turn out people in 2016. They won in 2020 because you had the highest turnout in the United States since 1900. The second thing, going back to our previous point, there's been a higher turnout amongst women than there has amongst men. And Harris enjoys about a 12 to 13% advantage amongst women over Trump, whereas Trump's advantage had been around about 10 to 11% with men, although that's been slipping in recent days.
Scott, we have the presidential vote, of course, but we also have the elections happening further down ballot. So the House and the Senate. What are you watching for there? There's multiple different scenarios. Where should the scrutiny be when it comes to Congress?
I think the most likely call tonight, the only one I would put a bet on is that the Republicans will take the Senate narrowly. The Democrats have a 51-49 majority, but I think the Republicans are a lock to take West Virginia and almost certain to take Montana. The Democrats will be trying to defend 6 other seats, and I think they may hold all of them or at least 5 of them. Look at the House, though. I think the Republican majority of 9 seats could flip tonight. It's going to come down to probably 4 or 5 seats in the balance. Why is that very important? Because if Democrats control the House, it's harder for the Trumpists to ram through their legislation. It is where all appropriations and budget bills start. So it's very important in terms of economic issues. And it means that the Democrats will control the committee chairs. And of course, the committee chairs are much more powerful in the U.S. than they are in many European systems.
Scott, when it comes to the days ahead, there are going to be some states that take longer to tabulate these votes than others. We've done some reporting, Bloomberg's done some reporting about concerns, certainly amongst the Democratic camp, that maybe Trump comes out and declares himself winner prematurely. What is the risk in the days ahead of that kind of response, and how much resilience is there in the system to cope with that?
The specific issue is that under the state rules, when they count ballots, Pennsylvania doesn't start counting early votes until the polls have closed. That's why they came in so late last time, as did Michigan. What we saw in 2020 is what we're going to see again this year. Donald Trump came out between 3 a.m. in the morning, our time, here in the UK and in Ireland, and he declared that he had won. He said, that's it. Now, he was trying to preempt, in fact, what then happened, that the vote shifted to Biden and gave Biden the victory. He may do the same thing this time. He will, if he is losing, whether it's narrow or even more substantial, he will almost certainly declare this a rigged election. He will put pressure on state legislators, on state governors to flip the results. He will file series after series of legal cases. He will put pressures on Republican legislators in Congress to block the certification of Kamala Harris. But here's what is different this time. If his supporters go out on the streets, and if they pursue violence, will Trump call them off, or will he, as he did on January 6, 2021, stay silent or even support those who come out and carry out violence as patriots? I hope we don't get to that point, but that's the one we have to be prepared for.
OK. Scott Lucas, smart analysis as the voting starts, of course, in the US, and maybe some of the risks as well on the horizon in the next 24 to 48 hours. Professor of US and international politics at the Clinton Institute, University College, Dublin. Let's switch focus now on the earnings front. We've got some details and lines crossing from Vestas, of course, the wind turbine maker based over in Denmark. They now see full year adjusted earnings margin at the low end of the range of between 4 to 5%. The estimates had been for margins of 4.1%. They see margins at the low end of that range between 4 to 5%. In terms of the revenue story for the third quarter, it was a solid beat for Vestas, coming with revenues of just shy of 5.2 billion euros. The estimates had been for around 4.8 billion euros. So in terms of the revenue, it was a beat. But in terms of the other items, let's just have a look at the EBITDA. Before significant other items were taken into account, it looks like for the third quarter that was a miss versus the average estimate. They had to account for 235 million euros in terms of those items. The estimates had been for around 353 million. The revenue, again, coming in as a beat, coming in above the estimates for Vestas, and then a guide around the margin story on that gap between 4 to 5%. We'll get more on all of that when we speak to the Vestas chief executive. That's Henrik Andersen. That's at 8:30 a.m. UK time. Coming up, the world's biggest oil producer maintains the world's biggest dividend. We're going to get the latest on this morning's Aramco results. We are live at the Middle East Energy Conference, ADIPEC. That is next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back. Saudi Aramco has held its quarterly dividend, the world's largest, at $31 billion. That's despite lower profit for the business. This is the Saudi Arabian multi-trillion dollar economic transformation plans widen the budget deficit for the country. For more, let's bring in Bloomberg's Middle East and Africa anchor Jumana Pasechi, who is at the ADIPEC Energy Conference in Abu Dhabi and has been pouring through these numbers for us. Jumana, what for you were the key takeaways then from Saudi Aramco's Q3 results?
Yes, good morning, Tom. So the key takeaway here is that this is the third quarter in a row that Aramco are actually seeing net profit declines. Year on year, net profit has come in 15% lower than where it was. The headline figure was at $27.6 billion. In a statement put out, Aramco put it down to weaker refining margins in addition to lower oil prices. But also, you need to take into consideration that Saudi Arabia have simply just been producing fewer barrels a day, 9 million barrels a day versus a total potential output of 12 million barrels, in line with those voluntary OPEC reductions, those voluntary cuts that we've been talking about. And actually, to that effect, they've actually postponed the decision to put more barrels back to the market by a month, as we were speaking about yesterday, which tells you a lot about the macro landscape that the oil industry is finding itself in. But going back to these Aramco earnings, yes, there appears to be pressure on their net income, but then one thing that people really tend to watch out for is what they're doing with the dividend payout. They have maintained it at $31 billion, and that is despite the fact that the free cash flow number is sitting at around $22 billion. So you've got a higher dividend payout than the total number of free cash flow that they're sitting on, raises questions about sustainability. Now, that dividend number is very important, not only as a key attraction for shareholders as a very high dividend yield, but also as a key revenue source for the government. And you have to remember that 97% of Aramco is still held by the state and by PIF. So an important source of finance. But at the same time, the macro outlook doesn't appear to be so supportive right now. And that is a key consideration for Aramco investors.
Well, indeed, and that ties to your point about whether or not this dividend is sustainable in the longer term. You're obviously on the ground for us at ADIPEC. Jemani, you've been very, very busy in the last few weeks. What is the agenda on the ground at this event?
You know, ADIPEC is an opportunity to talk about some of the long-term drivers that we spoke about yesterday, the new sources of demand, the transformation of the energy grid, data centers, what that is going to mean. But then short-term drivers, we're still talking about the OPEC Plus decisions, the fact that there is still a lot of supply hitting the market, not from OPEC, but from other sources, U.S. production, Guyana production, Brazil production, all supplying extra pressure to the market. But then geopolitics also on the agenda as well, some of the surprises that could come out of the region, in addition to the thing that everyone else is talking about today, and that is the U.S. elections and how either a President Harris or President Trump could affect the landscape for energy. Now, I had the opportunity to sit down with the Indian energy minister yesterday, a really wide-ranging discussion. But one of the questions I asked him was about a possible return of President Trump and what that could mean vis-a-vis applying sanctions to countries like Iran and also Russia. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Let me tell you what sanctions. The term is very loosely used. When it came to oil, what we had is a price cap on Russian oil.
Yeah.
Russian energy was coming in. The Russian energy coming in through a pipeline to Hungary was coming in. They're still buying billions of dollars worth. Russia is selling $14 billion worth of critical minerals to Europe, EU. They're selling oil to Japan. They're selling. So, what is at stake on Russian oil came under a price cap. But please, Bloomberg, look at it from my point of view. If I'm asked to buy cheaper oil because the other guy can't sell beyond a point, should I be happy or unhappy? That explains the thing. You asked us to buy cheaper oil. We said we are happy to buy cheaper oil. And then their shares went up. Now the others come to us. I can't say through Bloomberg, but confidentially say, how much discount. I said, speak to my companies. When we float a tender, quote competitively and you'll be all right.
So sanctions don't work then?
No, I don't. They were not sanctions. They were the price cap.
Price cap.
No, the price cap. So the point is, if you have a good piece of art to sell or a good product to sell, it's a question of what the market can take. Russians were producing 13 million barrels of oil before all this happened. The Americans are producing 13 million barrels of oil. Now, it has come down. They've come down considerably because their refineries, this thing, etc. But the market determines these things. I can't sit and take a strategic decision because nobody's asking me. It's my OMCs or oil marketing companies are answerable to their stakeholders. The private sector companies are answerable to their stakeholders.
So let me just tell you one thing that I think is really key to that discussion here. The OPEC put out a piece a few weeks ago suggesting that India are going to be the biggest driver of energy demand over the next 20 years, 3 times as much as China, which puts the India energy minister in a very strategic position of being able to select who he gets the pricing from and who he gets supplies from. And you heard that basically he was saying, we're just going to go with whoever supplies us with the cheapest price. We don't really care about the geopolitics. So very interesting commentary coming there from one of the largest buyers of oil in the market today.
Yeah, that is a remarkable pivot point, isn't it, when that comes in terms of the buying power of India versus China. Hence the importance of speaking to him, of course. Bloomberg's Middle East and Africa anchor Jumana Pasechi on the ground for us at ADIPEC, bringing us those key interviews. Jumana, thank you. Now to some other news making the headlines this Tuesday. European and US intelligence officials believe Russia is behind a plan to place incendiary devices on cargo planes bound for North America. 4 people have been arrested. German security services think a parcel that caught fire at an airport in July was probably planted by Russia. The officials tell us they are taking the alleged plot seriously and expect Moscow to attempt similar acts in the future. Spain's deadly storms have moved north, causing chaos in Catalonia. It comes as the region struggles to recover from the unprecedented rain, which caused widespread damage and killed over 200 people in neighbouring Valencia. Spanish King Felipe has warned angry residents about misinformation and false claims circulating on social media. This after he and Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez were pelted with mud by angry residents. There's plenty more coming up. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back. You're watching Bloomberg Daybreak. Drawing your attention to this chart that shows the linkages, the correlation that we've seen that is now broken down between US 10-year yields and expectations, odds on predicted of Donald Trump's likely victory, according, of course, that has evolved, that story, to that predicted betting system and betting online place, of course. In terms of the correlation, you have seen that pretty tight in terms of the yield story. Yields up as the expectation has built that Trump could win this election. That, of course, has changed in terms of the odds. We're now very much neck and neck, and the predicted odds have come down in terms of expectations around Trump, or at least the betting odds have adjusted to suggest there's less chance that Trump wins this election than had been previously. Yields, though, remain relatively high. Of course, there is an expectation that with more fiscal spending and tax cuts and tariffs, you could see higher yields and more selling pressure, at least at the back end when it comes to that Treasury curve stateside. Let's move on to the calls around JP Morgan then in terms of what happens to the US dollar and some of its counterparts, depending on who is in the White House come January 2025. Harris or Trump, of course, and expectations that you get a broadly stronger US dollar. If Trump wins, the expectation that commodity currencies get a bit of a hit. Harris, a very different story. Weaker US dollar on that outcome. The opening trade is up next. This is Bloomberg.